management system, or REM for short, which is a great name. I can't imagine we'll have any issues trademarking that. Can't imagine anybody else is using REM right now. But this new single REM system is designed to make it easier for providers and their staff to address and prevent, rather, events that could put Tennesseans with disabilities at risk. We're also empowering the people we support by providing them with measures that will prevent harm and protect those at risk. At the same time, we want to ensure that they are confident in their own decisions. You can learn more about the new REM system at the website, www.tn.gov/DIDD/REM. In addition, if you have any questions that aren't going to be submitted or haven't been submitted or not going to be brought up today that come up afterwards, there's also an email address at the bottom of this screen that you'll be able to utilize for any questions. We can move on to the next one, please. Thank you. So with the advent of the REM system, arose the need for a comprehensive alignment training on the newly developed system, which is in continued development with the REM work group. The training is going to be offered through the Relias training platform and eventually will replace the current PFH training. Again, this training has been a collaborative effort. It's on the part of the DIDD, TennCare, the MCOs, and despite any misrepresentations, we work pretty well together. So it's been a pleasure to work with them. Move on to that next slide, please. So the pilot provided training has been completed as of yesterday. That included 14 pilot providers that took part in the training through the Relias system. As part of that training, pilot providers were asked to submit feedback on the training, which will be utilized by the REM work group to enhance the experience wherever possible. Once the enhancements are made and the training has been finalized, the announcement of the rollout will be made through the DIDD communications group. You can move on. So to further expound upon the next two slides, I'm going to turn it over to the very capable Director of Reportable Events, Elizabeth Duhawk, who has by far the coolest acronym DIDD has to offer, and DRE. So DRE, please take it over.
All right. What Jason is actually referencing, which will be what my new job title will be when we move towards the alignment, which will be Director of Reportable Events. And again, my name is Elizabeth. What we want to share with you is that in the HCBS programs, we're going to have 3 categories of reportable events, which are Tier 1, Tier 2, and the additional reportable events and interventions. And an event that's classified as a Tier 1 or a Tier 2, or an additional reportable event and interventions, as defined by TennCare, the provider, the MCO, or the FEA staff will be responsible for reporting those to the MCO and DIDD as specified within our protocol that we have. And the type of reportable events dictates the reporting requirements and the process that must be followed by the provider, the MCO, and DIDD as applicable. And what that means is that Tier 1 events, if you can move to the next slide, Tier 1 events are ones that you would call into the DIDD abuse hotline. And that number, I'm sure most of you are familiar with. And the process for that, that's not changing. It'll be that you need to report those events no later than 4 hours after the occurrence of the event or the discovery of the event. And the Provider Event Management Coordinator, which we are calling the EMCs, some of you may be still going by the Incident Management Coordinator, but we're moving away from the term incident and going towards events. Those people will submit a ref for the Tier 1, the Tier 2, and all the other additional reportable events and interventions to both DIDD and the MCO by the close of the next business day after the event was witnessed or discovered. So that process, for those of you who are familiar with that, that is not changing. It's the same process that you will submit the refs to us by the next business day. The current contacts, if you guys have questions as this process continues, if you have technical assistance with reporting events, or if you want additional training, if you have questions, you can reach out to the contacts that we have listed at the REM website page, and that would be me along with my assistant director, and we'd be happy to help you out.
All right, thank you very much, Liz. We will continue on with the provider investigator training. The provider investigator training, I'm sorry, let me go back, there we go. Provider investigator training upon implementation of the REM system, all providers will be responsible for conducting the Tier 2 investigations for reportable events and then submitting that investigative report for any Tier 2 allegations. Providers shall ensure that all Tier 2 investigations are conducted by a certified provider investigator. So with that, all providers will be required to have one provider investigator who must complete an online competency-based training through the Quilt Institute to receive that certification. So with that in mind, DIDD will pay the initial enrollment fee for one person to attend the training at each contracted provider. Any subsequent or additional training will be at the expense of the provider. This is going to include all the waivers, HCBS choices, employment and community first choices, Katie Beckett, and the 1915C waiver programs. If you could go ahead and move to that next slide, please. So the provider investigator training consists of 8 modules. I'm sorry, I jumped ahead there for a minute. Much like the alignment training, a pilot program for the provider investigations training will be in place before the official rollout. The provider investigator training is going to consist of 8 modules. As it stands, this training is estimated to take roughly 40 hours to complete. With those modules, you'll have the introduction of the reportable events management, as well as dignity of choice, the provider investigator process, evidence collection, provider policy plans and documentation, conclusions, findings, and the final report, the due process, as well as a summation of all the other modules. So we're excited to be able to roll that out to you guys. It's not, the Quilt Institute has done a fantastic job with it, and as soon as additional announcements are ready to be made, again, that'll come through the DIDD communications group. And that is going to do it for my portion of this PowerPoint. I think we will move on to now. I'll send it back to Kara. Thank you.
All right, so thank you very much, Jason, for just giving an overhead view of what we're looking at over the course of the next few weeks and few months. Hopefully that'll give you all a good overview of what we're doing. Now, like I mentioned, we did get quite a few questions that were submitted ahead of time that people would like to answer to. So first, I do believe that Vicki Loveday, our director, would like to introduce 2 people that will be supporting her in some of the different roles as a part of this REM alignment. Vicki, would you like to introduce those folks? Vicki, you're on mute, so if you could unmute yourself, that would help.
Can you hear me now?
I got you, Vicki.
Okay. I'm actually communicating through the cell phone. So what I wanted to do is introduce myself again. I'm Vicki Loveday, the Director of Investigations. And in the new One Aligned system, we also have 2 additional roles, and that one first being Debbie Posey, who is our Investigations Manager. She will be assisting and overseeing the Tier 2 investigations statewide. And then Tiffany Waldo Alley, she's our investigations trainer, and she will be assisting with registration for all the various providers and ensuring that we have certified provider investigators. So you'll become familiar with them in the very near future. So Kara, I'm ready for questions from what's coming.
Okay. Great, Vicki, and first we're going to start with questions that we're going to direct to Vicki, and then there are some more questions. So to kind of make it easier to break up the 2 sections, then there will be some questions directed to Jason, and then we'll get to some of the questions I'm already seeing coming in the chat box. Okay, so first question, our agency operates in both Middle and East regions. I have included staff in both regions on one registration form. Some of our staff work solely in one region, others work in both regions. Can these all be submitted on one registration form? And if so, do I need to upload it to the cloud in both regions? or should I complete 2 separate registration forms, one for East and one for Middle? This person does not want to be charged twice for staff who work in both regions. Vicki, can you answer this question?
Absolutely. I'm going to break this out into 2 parts. For the first part, the form does need to be completed for each staff member that you're submitting to attend the training. We will do background checks regarding that to make sure that they're not identified on any of the abuse registries. The state will pay for 1 person per provider per region. So, for example, if one provider submits 3 names for staff in East and 3 names for staff in Middle, the state will pay for 1 staff in the East region and 1 staff in the Middle region, and then the provider will have to pay for the 4 remaining staff. The second part of that question is the provider is not restricted to regional boundaries. If the staff from Middle were to travel to East to do those investigations or vice versa, it makes no difference. For funding, that is the only thing that's restricted by region and by provider.
All right, thank you very much, Vicki. Our next question is do we need to take the training if we are currently not participating in the DIDD program? Vicki.
So this alignment, if you're providing services in the ECF or the Choices Waiver, the state ICF or private ICF funded through TennCare, you are going to be required to participate in this training, and you will be a part of the REM alignment.
Thanks, Vicki. Next question. We have 2 agency investigators. Both have attended the DIDD LRA training and are certified. My understanding is that they do not need to attend the quilts training. Is this correct? So the question is if people have completed the LRA, do they need to complete the quilts training? Vicki.
Yes, and that is correct. If they have completed LRA or the Labor Relations Alternative course, they will be allowed to continue to conduct Tier 2 investigations. That's a certification. We will want to verify either through our records, since the ID provided that training, or it was conducted through our department. Well, if we do not identify them in our current records, we will ask that they provide us with that documentation. But certainly, they are certified to conduct investigations already.
All right, and just before I get to the next question, it's my understanding that people are privately emailing questions to, I am listed twice for some reason in WebEx, but the other person is my assistant. And so people are getting private messages and private questions from her. I cannot see those questions. So please, if you have a question, please address it to everyone. Otherwise, I am not seeing that question and will not be able to ask and get that question answered. So that will help move this process along. Okay, the next question is this video mandatory to watch, or do we just have to watch it if we have questions? I believe we're talking about the REM alignment video that we produced and released earlier.
This presentation is just an introduction and an overview for the alignment that you're participating in today. But you must complete the Reliance training for the alignment, and the reportable events form training will also be required in the future. I'm not aware of any additional video requirements at this time.
Okay. This is for this training that you were answering for this training. If the person is talking about this training, she's answered. If the person is talking about the video that was released about the REM, while not a requirement, I would strongly encourage everyone to watch it. It is not long. It is maybe 3 minutes tops. So hopefully that's not taking out too much time for folks to watch and fully understand what we're trying to do with our reportable event management and critical event management alignment.
And Kara, I'd like to add, Kara, I would like to also let everyone know that we are going to be making an additional video. It'll be a short video that will just be for the direct support professionals, so that they know that they're a part of this upcoming system and that they understand where they fit in and what their purpose is in this system as well. So we are creating an additional video to get that messaging out as well.
Yes, by no means have we put out everything from a communication standpoint that we plan on putting out about this over the course of the next few weeks and months. So stay tuned. Can you tell me if the incident investigator can also be the incident management coordinator, or if that role must be filled by someone other than the person serving as the IMC? Vicki, can you answer?
Sure. Anyone that is that the provider chooses may be the provider investigator if the background checks have no findings. It's anticipated that most provider investigators will serve in more than one role within a provider agency, and it's not solely assigned, and they're not solely assigned to conduct Tier 2 investigations. Some providers will have nominal investigations, whereas other providers that are larger may have multiple investigations. So that's totally up to the provider's discretion.
Thanks, Vicki. The next question is, will DIDD pay for an investigator at each of our 8 locations, or only one for the entire statewide agency? We support over 600 people statewide and need at least one investigator per unit. Vicki.
Sure. DIDD will, again, pay for one person to attend per provider per region. So, for instance, if you have 6 different offices in the middle region, DIDD will only pay for the one person within that region. Any additional staff will be charged $60 to attend the Quilts Training Institute. And staff may conduct investigations for their providers at any location in any region.
All right, the next question we have is, I have a question related to who can contract to do Tier 2 investigations. Would a person have to be an employee of or affiliated with an agency to conduct these investigations? Example, if I wanted to be an independent contractor with agencies to do their Tier 2 cases, would I still be granted access to the Quilts training and be allowed to work with DIDD's investigations coordinator for completion of the case? Vicki.
Only persons that are employed by a contracted provider may conduct Tier 2 investigations. Once you've been identified, the provider with whom you wish to contract with to use their certified provider investigator, this will require the same process as we currently do with business associate agreements, or the BAAs. The agreement must address Health Information Portability and Accountability Act, which is HIPAA, and Title 33. All BAAs will be submitted to the same email address, the DIDD REM help, and at that time we'll process those requests, and those have to be approved by our department. The BAA must include the identified provider investigator that they're asking to conduct their providers' Tier 2s.
Thank you very much. Next question. I did want to confirm that this training requirement is limited to staff members who have direct care or interaction with staff. I ask because we are a large national provider with over 300 employees, and we have several staff members who never speak with or interact with clients in any way, i.e. IT or finance support staff. Vicki.
Again, if this is pertaining to the alignment training, all staff are going to be expected to complete that training, as everyone needs to be aware of the changes, what reportable events are, how those reports are to be made, and the time frames. If it's regarding the provider training, it's only for those providers who want to conduct the Tier 2 investigations, and that person can be anyone once certified. They don't have to be direct support staff. So if they wanted to use someone from their finance office to do those investigations, that would be acceptable.
Thanks a lot, Vicki. Next question. Is there an applicable regulation that might cover this requirement and include definitions on which staff members must receive this training? Vicki.
Yeah, I think we've spoken to that, but just to reiterate that it can be anyone within that provider agency whom they wish to select to be that. Of course, they have to complete the background check to make sure that they're not on any of the prohibited lists for, for instance, felony abuse registry or the statewide abuse registry.
Thank you, Vicki. One more question before we're going to go over to questions for Jason. I also wanted to see whether you could provide me with some basic information on the length of training, number of courses, or time that it would take a required staff member to complete. Vicki.
Sure. So again, as Jason pointed out in his presentation, there's 8 modules. It's anticipated that each of those modules will take between 2 and 4 hours to complete. And so in totality, it's expected to be 40 hours is what Quilts Institutes anticipates. In regards to the length of time and the amount of training so that they can continue with any additional responsibilities and duties, we're asking that once they start the training, that they complete it within 30 calendar days.
All right, thanks, Vicki, and thank you, Vicki, for answering all of those questions in short order. Now I'm going to turn over to Jason Allen to answer some of the pre-submitted questions that are focused on the Relias REM training. First one was, it's less of a question, but kind of a question, is somebody mentioned there is an REM lesson in Relias now. Can you clarify what that is and where we're going? Jason.
Yes. Sure. So as we spoke about earlier during the presentation, the pilot provider training has already concluded. It concluded yesterday. The Relias training that was in there is currently deactivated, so there is no alignment training in Relias currently. But once implementation rolls out and that information will be provided through the communications department, we'll certainly have one in Relias for them to take at that point. But no, currently there's nothing in Relias because the pilot provider training has concluded as of yesterday.
Okay, should we go ahead, make the assignments, and start work on the lesson? Any reason to wait until February 1? Jason, you want to kind of add on to what you just talked about?
Sure. So we have asked that the providers refrain from completing the course and until the rollout occurs. This will allow the alignment work group to ensure that all the feedback that we've taken from the pilot providers can be addressed, and any revisions or enhancements, as I noted earlier, to the training can be made before the course is made available to the broader network of providers.
Okay, next question. What does this mean? The reportable event management protocol will be shared as an additional lesson upon completion of this lesson. Note, this document is currently being updated and will be provided upon implementation on 2/1/21. It is at the bottom of one of the slides within the REM lesson. Jason.
So again, that's now been pushed back a little bit, and we will announce when that the official alignment training will begin for all providers, but it was determined that the protocol should not be released before the implementation of that training. So as such, the REM protocol will be uploaded and review, or for review rather, and those announcements again will be made through the communications department.
Okay, is the Relias REM lesson that provider management needs to take prior to 3/1/21 the same as the training that other staff have until 5/31/21 to take?
One thing we know as investigators that when you ask a closed-ended question, it's always potentially going to get a closed-ended answer. And so yes is the answer to that, is that it will be.
Okay, and then we have, does the training apply to all ICF staff?
Yes, this will apply to all IDD providers to include the private ICFs as well.
And then we are a durable medical equipment provider who from time to time provides equipment through the Choices program. Does the REM apply since we are not in-home caregivers?
Well, first off, thank you for your service, but no service providers such as medical equipment, pharmaceutical, pest control, or home repair are not required to complete the REM training.
Okay, so those are the end of the pre-submitted questions, but I did mention, you see in chat that the questions that were talked about the investigator training were actually about the Relias training. So it was wanting to see whether you could provide me with some basic information on the length of the Relias training, number of courses or time that it would take a required staff member to complete. So this is specific to the Relias training.
Kara, if I could just say something, I think we're getting this is Teresa. I think we're getting a lot of questions related to the training. I think part of it could be helpful if we kind of went through, there are different trainings that we're speaking of. There is a current training in Relias that we're piloting that will be for the executive director, the management type staff. It's a broader overview of the whole entire system. There will be a shorter training in Relias that is under development that will be for those direct care staff. And I see that Melanie and others are asking questions regarding who is required to take the training. It's the same folks who are currently required to take the protection from harm training that's in Relias, whether that be for 1915C or ECF. It's if you have a financial office in another state or in another building and they're never going to be around a person supported and they really have no chance of ever, witnessing an event occur, then, they're not going to have to take the training. But, situations like that are not usually the norm. But I think there were a few providers or companies that said that they're multi-state. If you have an office in Pennsylvania, we're not going to make them take Tennessee critical or reportable event management training. So sorry to jump in on that, but I do in the other training, which I'll let Vicki talk about because you're going to get to a question about that later, I think, is the training for the provider investigator, and that's the one in quilts. And I think there's also some misconceptions about the length of that training. So when you get to that, Vicki can address that. And again, like Kara, you said earlier, we're going to be getting a lot of communications out over the next few weeks or next month or so that will really help alleviate some of what we're hearing now, because we just want to set the record straight on some things and just get the correct information out there. So we really appreciate you guys joining us, and we'll have several more of these webinars, I'm sure, as we roll things out. Thanks, Kara.
Thank you very much, Teresa. And before we get to the questions that were asked in the chat box, some of which kind of Teresa gave a little bit of a high-level overview for, I am going to share my screen quickly because I want to show you all where you can find some of the documents that we're talking about. So first of all, you should be able to see, this is the DIDD remote event management page, reportable event management page, sorry. I'm getting my R's mixed up. First of all, you can see that we've got a little bit of information here about what it is. We've got the video that we talked about already, a very short video about an animation about kind of giving you an overview of what this is. Also, we have a one system REM protocol that is on here and REM protocol definitions. Those are both on here right now. This will be the page where you will be able to, a landing place to be able to find this. There's contact information for reportable event management, anything that you might want and need to know who to contact, you can find that on this page. So first of all, this page is up on the DIDD website. We encourage you all to go take a look because this will be a landing area for our information, including the PowerPoint for this and the recording for this training. These will both be up here once we get them concluded. So that's where you can find this information. Other things I want you to know, places that you can always find information, places we will utilize OpenLine always. So if you are a Choices provider, an ECF Choices provider, and you are not subscribed to our OpenLine, Carly will give you, we'll put in her email address and you can email her to subscribe to OpenLine. Understanding that not everybody is reading OpenLine, although they should, we will also utilize listservs at times. We will utilize going directly, asking our partners at the managed care organizations through their provider relations folks to send out information as well. All of this information, we will use multiple channels to get this information out there so that you all can feel comfortable with what is going on and what are the next steps. So we will use everything. Oftentimes things will come, you've heard the DIDD communications department several times. They will come from me. They will come, if it's coming from me, it is something that has been vetted, approved, and ready to go out. So those are the things that you all need to know. We are going to do everything we can to make everyone feel prepared and comfortable as we approach implementation of a single system. Teresa, would you like to add anything to that, to what I just said?
No, Kara, I think you covered that very, very well. I think over the next little bit of time, we'll be getting our plan. We'll be getting the plan finalized together. Kara will be getting out the information. We have a special dedicated mailbox like we did for COVID that we've placed an open line. I think went out in some memos from the providers, and I think it's on our website as well, Kara. You can directly email any questions that you have regarding REM or the REM process. We will answer those questions on our WebExes, or we will, directly answer if it's a question that's very specific and not something that would, be for a WebEx if it's something particular about your registration or something like that. But know that also, if you have any direct questions about something specific, I see some questions up that Kara's going to get to about Relias and training like that. Jason will go through in a minute when he answers that question, some specific contacts and just information that you'll need for there. But we'll be sure that this information is getting out to you in print, to use Kara's language, and not just us verbally saying this to you on the WebEx in case you can't write things down as quickly or in case you miss something. So it is appreciated, and we really appreciate Kara and her team for jumping in here and really helping us with getting this information out quickly.
And one of the things we will do is we'll also work on compiling and answering frequently asked questions so that this information can live somewhere in print as opposed to just verbally, as Teresa said. So going to go through the questions. First one, my organization provides services all over the state of Tennessee, so we're struggling to know which DIDD region to submit the registrations to. This is in regards to the provider investigator training. So Vicki, can you answer this question?
Sure. If you're uncertain of which region you can send it to, you can go ahead and send it to one of those boxes, and we will definitely redirect it to the appropriate region for you.
Second question, we have had several folks sign up for the PI training and have had no response. When will we receive information on this training? Vicki.
Sure. Currently, right now, the modules are continuing to be developed, and we will be doing a piloting of those modules with a select group number of every waiver. Those people have already been identified, so that we can ensure that the final product as it rolls out, is going to be the most beneficial to those staff that are taking it. As soon as Quilts Institute has that system fully developed, they're going to provide us with a link, and once those provider investigators that have registered have been vetted and their background checks have come back, you'll be provided that information. Those links will be sent directly to those people that have been registered and qualified.
Okay, so next question I see was about ICFs. Vicki already answered that question, or either Jason answered that question as far as does this cover ICF, and will this be the same process for ICF? Anything else you want to add about that, Vicki or Jason?
No,
Okay.
They will be included.
Cool. So next question. So you are paying for one individual to complete the training. However, what happens when that staff member is replaced by the institution? Secondly, who is paying the 40 hours of labor required for this training? Vicki?
Sure. So if the person that you select to attend the provider investigator training that's being paid for by the state resigns or moves to a different position or is terminated, then the provider would then have to select someone else and pay at their own expense that $60 to attend that training. The training itself is divided out and intentionally designed so that it does not take 40 straight hours. It can be broken up during that 30-day period. Again, that's why we elongated the training time period. Each of those modules can be up to 2 to 4 hours at most. So with that, being able to work that in within their scheduling. So that, again, would be part of their normal training process to be a provider investigator.
Thank you, Vicki. I think you've already answered the question, what if we have had this training in the past? The next question is are the behavior providers also required to have a reportable event management person? Vicki or Liz, can you answer this question?
I can address that. And I think it was in Jason's PowerPoint, and we kind of went over that fairly quickly, so I can understand that question being asked. So providers that are solely like equipment providers, pest control, behavior, clinical therapists, those types of provider agencies, they would automatically meet the exemption. So when you start reading through the REM protocol, you'll see that there's grounds to ask for an exception to investigate. And those providers normally would involve investigations with multiple providers. And one of the exceptions to provider investigator is if it involves multiple providers. So DIDD will be conducting those types of investigations. So clinical agencies, VAs, again, medical services providers, pharmaceutical companies, some of those other entities that are contracted will not be required to have a provider investigator.
Okay, do you want to reiterate the cost of the, what is the cost of the training and of this investigator training?
Sure. This training, which is only $60 per person to complete this training, and there's also something that Quilts is doing regarding badges and other incentives to people that have completed this training. So again, this is $60 for a provider investigator training. It's going to be an interactive training, as well as having coaches that will assist them. So it's going to be a very quality driven training, as well as competency based training. So it's something that I think is an extremely fair price for the type of training that this is going to be.
Thanks, Vicki. Let's see. What will be the reimbursement adjustment for the additional administrative burden? Vicki or Teresa, would you like to discuss this?
I'm sorry, Kara, could you repeat that one more time? Just want to be sure I understand I'm answering the correct question.
Somebody asked, what will be the reimbursement adjustment for the additional administrative burden?
Oh, okay. This may be a question that we asked to be sent to the mailbox, because I'm not sure if I'm going to fully be able to answer that question. Now, agencies should already, well, agencies and ECF and agencies within the 1915C, and I would think the Choices program, I know the ICFs do, already should have someone that's an incident management coordinator or an event management coordinator that would be, responsible for submitting the refs and doing that work that Liz has already described. In regards to the provider investigator, I would not think that would be I would hope, and I cannot think of any provider where it would be, thank goodness, a full-time job for someone. Now, currently, we do all the investigations, but we have to request documentation. We need to go through, a big, long process that we've heard numerous times is burdensome on the provider, the investigators going in there. This is someone in your shop that will be, when we get to it, when you see the investigation report, will be a lot smaller, a lot simpler than what we currently are operating with, because we did understand that people who would be performing this function, it wouldn't be their only job or their full-time job to be, the investigator for that agency. So honestly, if someone could submit that question, let me know what they might foresee as the additional administrative burdens. I think it would be easier for myself or Andy or Jordan or someone to look at it then and respond to the question. But at this point, we're not anticipating any additional administrative burden placed on providers. We're actually hoping this will alleviate some of the administrative burden that may have been placed on providers with us performing all of those Tier 2 investigations. Thanks, Kara.
Thanks a lot, Teresa. Appreciate it. Next question is kind of a dual question for both Jason and Vicki, because it involves the REM and PI, and it is, when does this training roll out? I think we touched on that, but if you'd like to elaborate, please do.
Sure, I'll start. On
Okay.
the actual provider investigator training, at this point in time, we still need to do success coaching and some additional training to be able to provide you with the best training and those feedbacks and coaching sessions. So like I said, this is an interactive training, not one of those WebEx or typical Relias training that you may have been familiar with our department. This is really going to be something unique and unusual for our department and an advancement. So what we're wanting to do is make sure that we have that really ready and piloted, and so that we ensure that it's easy for people across all waivers. And we're trying to be very mindful of people in the choices waiver as well as others that may have not had much experience in this realm, so that it's clear to them as well. But at this point in time, the actual date hasn't been set. Unfortunately, with the pandemic and other things that have come up in the last several months, it's kind of pushed our timeline back. The actual rollout date has not been set yet, but as soon as we have that actual date, we will definitely get it out there, because we're trying to, as Kara's pointed out, we're trying to get the messaging out now so that you have an idea of what's coming and why it's coming and what segments are going to be out there. So we're really wanting to try and keep you informed and communicate with you as quickly as possible. So when those dates are available, we'll let you know.
Just to add on that from the REM standpoint, as I had noted earlier, we ended the pilot program yesterday. With that, we're getting additional feedback from the pilot providers on how they, what their experience was like with the training itself. And so we'll continue to read over that, and we'll meet with the REM work group to discuss those things so we can better enhance the training. So there is no set date as of right now. As soon as we get those feedback responses in from all the providers, and we start working over that with the alignment group, I'm sure that once that information is available, again, the communications group will be able to announce a date for the rollout on that.
Thanks, Jason. Next question is how does this apply to providers that are only providing services for Choices personal attendant care and personal care? We're not licensed with DIDD and or ECF. Vicki?
Sure. The Choices providers are part of their MCO network, and they will be rolled into the alignment process. This is similar to what we're doing with the intermediate care facilities in the private setting as well. So that is part of the alignment, is bringing all IDD services together and taking care of business in the same fashion, regardless of waiver or funding.
Thanks, Vicki. Teresa, I know you wanted to take on a few of these Relias and training questions. So do you want to kind of give an overview?
Sure, Kara, thank you. First, I just want to say that the Relias training platform is, as Jason said earlier, the current platform that's used by the department for our trainings. We have registered providers and users for both most ECF providers as well as 1915C providers. We have enough registrations that we are going to be able to register for the Choices program and their staff. Many Choices providers have already reached out to our folks within the department, who is really Karen Chambers, who handles this, and started to register for the process. There are a couple things. If you already have a contract with Relias and use your own Relias platform, we can share our training with you to put onto your platform because we own it. That we develop the training, it's ours. So just reach out to us and we can work on helping to load the training if you don't want the folks to have to go into our platform if you already have a platform. We've also had Choices providers reach out to us and let us know that they may not use computer systems to train their staff, that they may do classroom training, or they may do paper training rather than using a platform such as Relias. We are going to work with you on that, and Jason will be taking the lead on that. We will figure out a way if computers or the virtual training is not something that you'll be able to do. Now, this is for the Relias training. This is not for the quilts training that I'm speaking of. I just want to be very clear on that. The Relias training is our platform. The training for the provider investigator is different, and that's through the Quilts Institute. But for the Relias training, we can work with your development staff or your training staff, and we can work on train the trainer and work on materials so that you can train your folks outside the Relias system. Of course, the Relias system is our first choice because we can run reports and it's much easier to be able to see who has had the training. But we do understand that there are some smaller providers out there that do not use computer systems. So we are going to be working with you. And I see a question here from Kunu. I'm sorry if I pronounced your name incorrectly. But we just need you to reach out to Jason or to reach out to Karen. We just need to know what system you're using. It may be something that we can work with. It may not be, but without knowing that, I really can't give a clear, concise answer to you. But we're going to do all that we can do to either get folks into the Relias system or to work on using a train the trainer if that is the only option that we have. So if anyone has any other questions on that, please just let me know, or you can submit them through the REM mailbox and we will answer them. But this is not something where it's going to start tomorrow. So we have, time to work with you on. Like I said, we've already been working with quite a few choices providers who are not already within the Relias system to get them up and running and ready to go. Jason, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that pretty well encapsulates it, but it's we will continue to work with the providers in any means necessary to ensure that they get the training they need.
Great, thank you both. Next question is Vicki. They wanted to know, who do they contact to see whether or not they're still qualified to do, a person is still qualified to do current investigation?
Sure, they can go ahead and submit that to the same boxes as they would for a registration form. And because we have an investigation specialist in each of those regions that you may already be familiar with. In East Tennessee, that's Christy Campbell. In Middle Tennessee, that's Kevin Smith. And in West Tennessee, that's Amanda Ross. They're going to be the investigation specialists in each of the regions that will be assisting the provider investigators in that specific region. And they'll be able to look up on the roster to see if they are still a eligible provider investigator based on labor relations training.
Thank you very much. Okay. Vicki, stay here. Will you explain the different tiers? So I believe that they're talking about Tier 1 investigations and Tier 2 investigations. So do you want to give a brief background on that?
Sure. Tier 1 investigations are those egregious events that involved either medical intervention or law enforcement and things of that nature. Tier 2 events are going to be those less egregious events that are more familiar with the provider agencies. And if you're an ICF, you're already familiar with doing those investigations already. Those investigations are going to be those types of allegations where a person alleges that the staff hit them, smacked them, something of that nature, in which there's no injury present and there's no medical intervention necessary.
Thanks, Vicki. We use a third-party private investigation background company that does a 13-point nationwide background as well as our state and local background checks. I'm not sure whether there's a question actually in there, but I'm guessing is the question, can they do this?
Hey,
sure.
Kara. Oh, sorry, Vicki, go on.
No, I was just simply going to reiterate what we're simply doing, because every provider is required to do the background checks for all of direct support staff or employees before they interact with person supported. What we're simply doing is doing a check of the state registries that we've already incorporated, the felony offender, the abuse registry, the sex offender registries, just to ensure, or in the OIG check, just to ensure that something doesn't pop up in those records, because, of course, we certainly wouldn't want someone that would be considered a prohibited staff conducting investigations or acting in that role.
Thanks. And I know I said this before, but apparently it's still happening. If you are trying to private message me in chat, I am not getting those questions. So it's my understanding that even though I said it before, somebody keeps doing it and is getting frustrated that I'm not answering the questions. because I do not see them. Please address your question in chat to everyone. Thank you. Is this taking the place of Choice's critical incident reports?
I got this, Kara. This is Liz.
Okay. Thanks, Liz.
No problem. I saw some questions from various people related to the Choices form. To let you know, we're going to be using one report form for everyone. So everyone is going to be following the same procedures and requirements as it relates to reporting. Those terms, those requirements are outlined in the protocol, the definition documents that Kara showed you is on the website. So if you wanted to take a peek at those, you'd be able to see the things that we'll be asking for as reporting requirements. And just to follow up with that, Kara, I saw that Kim Tabor had a related question about the form that I will just go ahead and address now. She was asking when will we get to view the new form and where can we find it on the website? And as we move closer to the alignment date, we'll be uploading the new report form. We plan to let the providers know when it's available. We'll be using open line and other channels of communication. So as we get closer to rollout, you'll be seeing that appear on the website.
Okay. I think we've answered the question about how long the Relias training is going to take. How do I get the video and how do we get signed up for the training? The video, as I mentioned, the video that's already out is on that REM website. How do we get signed up for the training? I believe we've also covered that as well. Does the training cover for all MCOs? Vicki?
Yes, the training, if you're talking about the provider investigator training, that covers for all waivers, all MCOs, all different types of providers. Once you become a certified provider investigator, you're not limited to any specific waiver, MCO, or provider type. So it's one, and that's part of the whole reason behind the alignment is so that we're all doing the same thing and we're doing it in the same format and the same consistency and expectations.
Also, I'll add that the Relias training also covers all MCOs as well. Is it too late to still register for the training?
So for provider investigator training, they have to have someone with a position of authority, the executive director or someone that the executive director designates, to identify them as the provider investigator for their agency. As far as the REM training, everyone can register for that, and I'll let Jason speak to it.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I didn't catch that last bit.
Is it still too late to register for the Relias training?
So for the Relias training, the pilot training, again, it's concluded as of yesterday. We have a database for all the provider agencies that we will be working with, and they're submitting their information to us. But that's additional correspondence and information will be provided about that. So no, it's not too late to register, but as I said earlier, there is no Relias training in Relias right now as it pertains to the alignment.
Thanks a lot, Jason. Vicki, this next one is my agency is privately owned and operated. We are not contracted with any providers. Am I still eligible to take the DIDD training? Actually, I'm gonna move that over to Teresa.
All right, again, Kara, this might be one where I need some clarification sent through the email because I'm not quite 100% sure as to what it means if they're not contracted with any provider. Anyone that provides services directly through either ECF, 1915C, an ICF, or the Choices program would need to have a provider investigator or and I don't know if Vicki's spoken about this yet. There are other avenues by which providers who are smaller providers may choose to share an investigator rather than have someone at each of their agencies. And there is a process for that we will get into more probably on a future WebEx. But if you are providing that direct service, whether it be, in-home PA services, a residential service, those, real hands-on services that aren't clinical in nature, they're not the BA services that Vicki excluded before or the OTPT, but you are going to have that training, whether or not you're contracted by DIDD and whether or not you're licensed by DIDD. If you are providing those services within one of the programs we've listed, which are pretty much all of the home and community-based waiver programs, plus the ICFs that are available in the state of Tennessee, then you will need to have, your staff will need to have the RELIAS training or the DSP training, and you will need to have a provider investigator that is either on staff of your agency or contracted with to provide those services.
Thanks, Teresa. Since you're here, you probably know the answer to this one. Will ISC agencies be included and be required to have an investigator?
No, ma'am. ISC agencies will not be included and do not need to have an investigator. It is very extremely rare that we'll ever have an incident that involves just an ISC. Normally, if there is an ISC involved in an incident, it also involves a second provider. And so ISCs will not be required to have their own investigator.
All right, thank you very much. Next question is to reiterate, 100% of all agency staff must attend RELIAS training. I think we talked about this. Even if they never leave the office, clean the office, et cetera, that's a lot of paid staff time for people that have no interactions with individuals. This question was probably asked before we covered it, but Teresa, would you like to reiterate?
Sure, I can reiterate it again. As far as the RELIAS training, and I think people are getting, and it's easy to do, I did it for a long time, are getting kind of blurred between what's the RELIAS training and what's the provider investigator training. The RELIAS training is not the provider investigator training. The training in RELIAS is going to be, as of right now, 2 separate trainings. One training that will cover the whole big new system that will be for executive directors and event management staff and anyone else the executive director deems needs to take it. This will be the program level staff. The other training in RELIAS will be a smaller, shorter training that is specific for DSPs, will be what their role will be and what they will need to know to be able to operate in the system, which really a lot of it will boil down to reporting, because they're going to be the reporters in a lot of, because they're the ones who are going to see the events as they occur. Now, if we move over to the training for the provider investigator, that's one we're paying for per region, per provider, and then providers can send other folks that they want, at the cost of $60 a person. That training is in the QUILT system by the QUILT Institute. It's a competency-based training. That's not a training that will be in RELIAS. It was in the PowerPoint, and Jason went through all the different modules that will need to be completed for that training. And while I'm speaking of that, I will address the fact of we will be getting a new timeline out and to address the 3.1 question above about needing to have the provider investigator trained by 3.1. Obviously, if the training's not complete, we're going to be moving that deadline, and we'll get that out to folks hopefully next week and kind of have a better understanding of when that will be completed and when we will require the training. But there's 30 days by which to complete that training, and it does need to be completed before a provider can investigate their own tier 2 investigations. So the QUILT training, and it's a QUILT platform that you'll be provided with, and you'll be able to take that one. That training, not being part of the RELIAS system, is one that will need to be done on a computer. It is a competency-based training. If there's an issue with that, we'll just have to get together and discuss, but this is a training for one, it's just required for one individual at your agency per region. If you want to do it for more, you can, but this is not the wide-reaching, every DSP has to take this training or management staff. Kara, I'm hoping I answered the question. I'm not sure if I did completely, because I kind of went off.
Well, you hit a couple of questions with that. So I'm glad you actually went where you went. So because we did have a question about once you have 30 days to complete the training, once you begin, it does, you talked about that. I'm not currently, we have a lot of RELIAS questions. for those, I think you've covered a lot of for those who aren't familiar with Relias and stuff like that, how we're trying to assist folks who have not previously used Relias. We do have some questions about notifications to get started with that, to get started in Relias. I believe I saw that answered in chat.
Yeah, I put Jason and Karen Chambers' emails into the chat box. So, and I do want to, Lisa Espinoza, it looks like she asked while I was speaking a question that related to it. So about, she was told that ISC agencies were required to have investigators. They are not required. There was a point in time where we were discussing requiring ISC agencies to have investigators, but after follow-up conversation, the determination was made that ISC agencies do not have to have a trained investigator for the simple reason of they have so few investigations a year, and they always involve another provider, and we're not going to, if an investigation involves two providers, we're obviously not going to have a provider investigating another provider. That will be a part of the state's role. So.
All right, Teresa, I think you're going to get a small, I'm going to go to Vicki for the next one, which is what
Thank
are the
you.
investigation expectations? Will interviews have to be conducted face-to-face? We will have one investigator for each region, and face-to-face interviews will include extensive travel between our offices. Vicki, can you advise?
Yes, one of the training things that we have done is that the person supported and the alleged perpetrator should always be a face-to-face interview. Those are critical interviews, and those things will be further detailed out in the actual Quilch training of what those expectations and how those and what the various processes are to conduct those interviews. That module again is on just doing interviews is about a 2-hour module, and we'll go into all the different facets at that time. This particular platform would not be really provide us the great opportunity to go into what those requirements are. But just the short answer to that would also be there are opportunities and circumstances in which telephonic or virtual interviews are acceptable.
Thank you very much, Vicki, and I hope that helps with that. The next question we have is for consumer direction, self-direction participants who the employers of their hired caregiver, who are the employers of their hired caregivers. Will their hired caregivers be required to take the Relias REM trainings? Vicki, would you like to answer that?
I'm sorry, Kara, can you repeat that? I was trying to answer something else.
No problem. For consumer direction and self-direction participants who are the employers of their hired caregivers, will their hired caregivers be required to take the Relias REM trainings?
They will be, Relias training, yes, they will be required to take the Relias training, but the SD waiver and the FE waivers fall under, for provider investigator training, they would fall under that category of exempt or exceptions because they would not be conducting their own investigation. So we will do those investigations for the SD and FEA waivers.
Great. I do see some questions about, for those who have only used the Choices Critical Incident form to report, needing some more clarification. We will work. This is just the beginning of this and the education campaign that will happen. So all of the things we're going to be doing over the course of the next weeks are going to assist in providing that clarification and providing that process so folks can understand the system and where we're moving. So I hope that people understand this isn't the last time you're going to hear about this. It might be the first time you're hearing about this, but it's certainly not going to be the last time you're hearing about this. We're going to do what we can to make everyone comfortable with this. Let's see. So let's see, registration question. Sorry, given the time and the sheer amount of questions, I'm trying to make sure that I'm not hitting some that we've already hit. Let's see. In regards to Relias REM training, I've had conflicting answers from the state and the MCOs regarding the training rosters we were recently required to submit. Our provider relations rep from an MCO said at this point we need to submit a roster for all staff. However, the contact at the state of Tennessee said that at this time, we just need to submit a roster with the higher level individuals who are responsible for training at our organization. Which one is correct? Jason, since this is Relias REM, can you answer this?
I'm sorry, it cut out. What was the question again? I'm sorry, Kara.
Sorry about that. The question is they've had conflicting answers. The MCO said they needed to submit a roster of all staff at this time for the Relias REM training. The contact at the state of Tennessee said that at this time, they just needed to submit a roster with the higher level individuals who are responsible for training at our organization. Which one is correct?
So as of right now, we're again the rollout hasn't been set, and so we don't have any requirements as far as submitting information. That will come out through the communications group, and at that time they'll provide you information as to what needs to occur for registration to occur.
Great, thank you very much, Jason. I see another question about an agency not being contracted for ECF choices or DIDD programs. Who needs to be part of this training? Once again, if you are a choices provider, you are a part of this. So even if you are not in DIDD and you are not an ECF choices provider, if you are a choices provider, this is a single system that is inclusive of regular choices. So just want to make sure that folks get that.
Hey, Kara, I think Vicki can provide some more information about what the MCOs are asking for. I think it's not really in relation to Relias. I think, again, there's some confusion. So, Vicki, if you could answer, this was the information we sent yesterday.
Yes, this is a separate request that's being asked for. The MCOs are trying to provide to DIDD the identity of every provider that they have contracted with. In addition to that, they're providing us with the points of contact, and we're asking for 2 points of contact. This will be utilized for communication needs. This will also be utilized for any data systems. So we need to know what waiver that each of the providers serve, as well as their executive director and an additional point of contact. And those emails were coming out from each of the MCOs because they're your primary point of contact at this time for both ECF and choices waivers.
Okay, I think the next question is one that a lot of folks are going to be happy with. Will one form be utilized to report all incidents with the REM program, or will there still be different forms used for different programs? Vicki or Liz?
One form, everyone. I know that is exciting for those of you who have had to do multiple forms. It'll be one form for everybody.
This is obviously one of the reasons we want to go to a single system is we want to eliminate duplication, and one form will make it easier for everyone as opposed to having different forms and different rules and different reportable events. So I just wanted to make sure that you all heard that because I see that some people were pretty happy about it in chat. Due dates. Are the due dates that were published for registration for the completion of the REM training or Relias now no longer applicable? Teresa, do you want to talk a little bit about the dates? Because I think we have a couple of questions about this coming up.
Sure, and this will be brief. I think I mentioned earlier that we're going to be having a new communication plan coming out after further discussions and knowing that there are a lot of competing priorities among providers right now, not the least of which is attempting to have people they support and staff get vaccinated and dealing with the COVID crisis. So we are going to be backing dates up. We'll be meeting in order to come up with a plan of what those dates will look like. And as soon as that's complete, we'll get that timeline out through your office, Kara, as to what the anticipation will be. It will be on our website. For now, though, and I think it was mentioned earlier that we have the definitions for the new program as well as the protocol on that website. So everyone can go and pull down the protocol, kind of see how this is going to operate, probably develop questions, lots of questions. I know I had lots of questions after I read it the first time. And we will be scheduling another WebEx probably in 2 weeks to give people time to read through it, digest it, and to ask questions. That information we'll put out for that WebEx and open line, and Kara will also send it to the MCOs on DIDD letterhead to get out to any providers who are not signed up for our open line. But again, this is not going to be your only chance. I know there's going to be a lot of questions and a lot more questions once you guys can see those documents that are now on our website, and be able to formulate questions about that.
Thanks a lot, Teresa. Next question is once approved to be a provider investigator, will it be required to recertify or complete refresher training at a certain interval? Vicki.
So we foresee in the future, as our systems change and modify, we will have updated training as needed or as the needs present themselves. But as far as having a mandatory regular refresher training, at this time, that is not a requirement.
Okay, next question I think is for Liz, which is what do we do with our policy and procedures in regards to incident reporting? Liz?
As far as policies and procedures related to your incident reporting, of course, we'll have to expect that those things are updated when the alignment happens, so that way everything is on the same page and that you're not using anything that is from the past.
Thanks a lot, Liz. And in the question, am I understanding correctly that if I am a minor home modifications choices ECFD IDD provider, I'm not required to have a PI? Teresa answered in chat, that is correct. If you are a minor home modifications provider, you are not required to have a private investigator. Can the executive director authorize themselves for the provider investigator role? Vicki or Teresa?
Yes, absolutely. The executive director can be, and they get to choose who they want to send from their provider agency. So anyone that they choose, and that can be themselves.
So the training that is being discussed regarding Relias is not for the provider investigator. The Relias training is for staff. For DSPs, the provider investigator training is the one that is being provided through Quilt. Vicki, is there any clarification, further clarification I need to make for that?
No, you've got it.
Okay. Is the Relias training to be completed annually, or is it a one-time training? Jason? We're not hearing you, Jason. Not sure. It doesn't seem like you're on mute.
I had my sneaky mute on. Yes, I'll hold off on that question until I can get some additional information, because I know that being that it's replacing the protection from harm training, I would assume that it is, but that's a good question, and that's something that I'll be sure, if whoever submitted that question would submit it to me directly, I'll be sure to get that answer for you and send it back out.
Sure. Next question. Has anyone looked at the data to see what percentage of current investigations are classified as Tier 1 versus Tier 2? Vicki or Liz or someone in the PFH team? Any thoughts on that?
Yes, as a matter of fact, all of that was considered over 2 years ago when we presented and we had these conversations with TennCare as to, we were receiving a lot of feedback from providers saying that they could do their own investigations and the time that it took for having, bringing staff in and all of these other things. And that's what really started us looking at providers doing their own investigations for Tier 2 or lesser egregious events, as far as time management and funding and all of that. We also, before we ever started looking at it and pursuing it any further in cooperation with TennCare, we looked to see how many investigations that was. So all of that was considered more than 2 years ago when we started this process.
All right, thank you. If we registered for the PI training based on previous information that ISC agencies were required to have one, Will we be eligible to proceed with the training, or will we not be eligible for it? Will it be a covered cost? Vicki.
Since the ISCs will no longer be required to be a participant in this, I'm actually going to, if they choose to, they absolutely can attend that training. Anyone that wants to attend in excess of the required training staff, they just need to put forth their name. We'll go ahead and do the background check, and then we'll release that to the Quilts Institute. If you have been approved and accepted to do that training, then you will, in excess of the one that will be paid for by the state, then the Quilts Institute will charge that fee to the provider directly.
Thanks a lot, Vicki. I see a lot of people asking how do they register for the quilts training. We did send out that information in several ways, including open line and through the MCOs. They should have distributed that information recently as well. So that information has been sent out through open line and the MCOs. We will send it out again via open line. So we will try to make sure that you all are able to see that information and get that information. Will anything change with initial notifications, investigation summaries, and provider plan of correction? Vicki or Liz, usually you get the initial notifications, but Vicki or Liz, if you could answer this.
Yes, we will continue to send out initial notifications, and if you, once you've had an opportunity to pull down and look at the protocol, the reportable event management protocol that's on the website, you'll have a better understanding of what that process will look like. It breaks it down into the various tiers, who's doing what. It does speak to the initial notifications, and it does talk about the new plans of corrections and that process as well. So, you know, this is just the early onset of what Kara's already pointed out, that will be multiple meetings in the near future after this introduction. And as we move forward, we'll go into greater detail in those different aspects. But you will continue to receive initial notifications from the department. And if you're in the choices waiver, you'll start receiving those once we go into the alignment process as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Will this form be utilized for the form or the REM form, or maybe it's an REF form? Will this form be utilized for home health private duty services? Liz?
The REF applies to events that occur to those who fall under the provision of services. So if that falls under the provision of services, home health private duty, then yes.
Okay, question about investigation. So going back to Vicki on this one, will DIDD create a standard investigation template for Tier 2 investigations, or will providers be able to create their own? Vicki?
There's a template that has been created. Those of you that have previously done investigations may be familiar with the template. This has been vetted through the feedback groups and the provider stakeholders that have participated in this alignment process. So it's not a form that was solely created by DIDD. The Tier 2 investigation form is a very modified investigative template where the information is identified, no summaries are provided, so and then just a brief analysis. So if you're familiar with our current state investigation reports and the length of those, it's nothing like that. It's the simple short form that you may have seen in the past.
Thank you very much, Vicki. I did realize I just skipped a question above that one. What is the cost on the Reliance training? Jason?
I'd be pleased to know that it's absolutely free.
So lucky you, you get the easy question. It's free. So glad we gave that one. I was giving you a break, Jason. Okay. Well, believe it or not, I didn't think that we were going to be able to get through the entire chat box in this time after I saw how quickly it grew. But it is 2:22, and we have made it through the entire chat box. first of all, I want to thank you all very much for coming today. This is, like I mentioned, this is just the start. This is not the end of the information we are going to have. I see one more question. I'm going to send it to him. How long is the training for field staff? If you're talking about staff that are not provider investigators, but just the Relias training, can you go over how long that training is going to be, the Relias training?
Specific for the Relias training, it varied. It's a PowerPoint with audio with it, so it really depends on if you take breaks or anything else. But the training itself has averaged, I think people were saying from the feedback that we received, anywhere between an hour and a half to 2.5 hours to complete.
Kara, this is Teresa.
Okay.
If I can just add to that, that training that Jason's speaking of is the training for the executive director and the event management coordinator and the program level staff. It's not the training for the direct support staff. That training is not complete yet. That is a training of the whole system, who need to know it from reporting an incident through the due process system and appeals. So that's, you can have your DSPs are welcome to take it. It's free. As many people as you want to take it can gladly take it. But the requirement for the actual staff in the homes, we don't know that answer to that yet, but it will not be as long, because we're going to just pull out the parts that they need to know about, because they're the parts that really affect their job and what they would be required to do. Sorry, Jason.
Yeah, that was based off of the provider, the pilot provider feedback, and those folks were agency management. So thank you for that clarification.
Not a problem. I made some people angry before, and now they're happy again. So I don't want them to get angry again. Appreciate it.
And then for how do we pay for the PI training? Apparently, for those you need to pay for, it is through Quilts directly in a separate registration after, where you will provide, and after approved by DIDD, you will pay it through the Quilts portal. So with that, I think we've got everything. I think we're going to call it a day. One of the things I will say is we are copying the chat box. So we will go through these questions, try to start them for a basis of a frequently asked questions document, so that we can continue to provide you with information. Thank you all for being patient. Thank you all for participating. We had at one point over 700 people on here. So that shows that people are paying attention, interested, and that we have a large group of people that we need to continue to provide communications to. So I see that as a challenge. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon, and we look forward to talking to you again. Goodbye.